Hi there. Today we're going to be making this bigger child's picnic table. It's about 48 inches long, 30 inches tall, and I've designed it so that kids up to the age of 12 can sit in it without being too cramped. To build mine, I used a combination of Type on 3 waterproof glue, Craig screws, and 2.5 inch outdoor rated decking screws. The Craig screws aren't really necessary, but I didn't want any screw holes on mine to show, so I used those instead. In order to build this project, you'll need two 2x6x8s pressure treated pine and 6 2x4x8s also treated. The first thing we're going to do is cut the tabletop, and you'll need 4 48-inch pieces out of the 2 2x6s. With the 4 tabletop boards cut, now we can cut the 2 tabletop supports that are 23.5 inches long out of this 2x4. Now, with my saw turned to 45 degrees on the right side of 0, I'm going to cut the 2 angles on the top supports. I'm going to line my blade up with this corner and cut straight back. Having made the 45-degree angle cut on one end of both boards, I've now flipped my saw to 45 degrees on the other side of 0 to ensure that the angles are perpendicular to each other, stacked them on top of each other, and I'm now going to cut them both at once. Now that we have all the necessary parts cut for the tabletop, the 4 slats and the 2 supports, I've laid all 4 of the slats across my workbench. I've clamped down this first one, and using this 1/2 inch plywood, I'm going to space them all apart. Having a lot of clamps in this situation helps a lot since I don't have 8 shop helpers. Once you have all your tabletop pieces fastened down to a workbench, you want to go ahead and measure in 4 inches from each end on the 2 end boards so that you know where to position these tabletops. Then I'm going to go through and mark the location of each board on these and drill my Craig screws. Now that I have all my pocket holes drilled, I'm going to go ahead and secure these down to the tabletop while it's still clamped to my workbench with 12 of these outdoor rated 2.5 inch Craig screws and some Type on 3 waterproof glue. Like I said earlier, these screws are completely optional. I didn't want any screws to show, so I chose to do this from the underside. If you want to, you can just use those 2.5 inch deck screws I mentioned earlier and go through the top. Make sure that when you install this, your board is actually to the inside of that 4-inch line that you marked. Just going to lay down some glue on each board. This just gives it even more strength. And just set it down. Line it up, make sure it's even from both sides. And secure 2 of the screws in the middle of the board. After this, you can just go ahead and repeat that process on this side and go ahead and drive home the rest of these screws. After you have assembled your tabletop, you're going to go ahead and cut 4 more pieces out of a 2x4 that are 26 inches long. These are going to become your legs. After you cut your 4 leg lengths, you're going to swing your miter saw to 30 degrees on the right side of 0 and cut 30-degree angles on both ends of all 4 of your legs, making sure that they're parallel to one another. your legs cut, you can go ahead and attach them to your tabletop. You want to make sure that this edge right here lines up with the outside edge of this board. Using 2.5-inch deck screws and glue, screwing from the inside out so that you don't show screw holes. I find it best to blow a screw through the bottom corner of it first so that it pulls it tight to the wood, and then you can remove the clamp. Put a few more screws in this leg and repeat the process with the other 3, and then we'll attach the seats. Once you have your legs attached to the table, you're going to take one more 2x4 and cut it into two 40.5-inch pieces. These are going to act as the seat supports. Now with my saw swung to 45 degrees, I'm going to cut the angles on both ends of both pieces, ensuring that they're perpendicular to one another. Since I build a lot of these kids' picnic tables, I've made a little spacer block. This is exactly 6 1/8 of an inch thick. What this does is it sits right here, and that gives me the exact distance that I need for this. That way it reduces a lot of measuring for me, and I don't have to make sure that it's level because I know that it is using the spacer block. The only thing that you have to make sure is that this distance to the outside is the same. Now that we have our 2 seat supports attached, we can go ahead and cut the middle support that keeps the legs from racking. This piece is 37 inches long and is made out of a 2x4. Now that we've cut our table support to 37 inches long, we can go ahead and position it on our seat supports. You want to make sure that you measure 16 inches in from each short point on the angle of the seat support. That will give you your positioning in the middle of the seat support for the table support. Now that I've marked the location of my table support on my seat supports, I'm going to go ahead and drill 4 pocket hole screws on both ends of my table support. Like I said earlier, this is not a necessary step. If you don't have a Craig jig, you can just as easily screw through the other side. Now, after I've cut my pocket holes, it's nice if you have a really long clamp, like I do, or a workshop helper, which I don't have, to help you hold these legs together. Because chances are good that they've splayed outwards, and you're going to have to bring them back together. I'm screwing mine to the table with 8 2.5-inch outdoor rated Craig screws and no glue. You want to make sure this is able to move if it so needs to. Just get your clamp firm on there to make sure you hold this in place. Go ahead and get it positioned. Once you get it in the spot that you want it, go ahead and tighten down your clamp and drive home your screws. With your table support attached, it's time to cut the final boards for the table, the seat slats. There's 4 of them, each made from a 2x4, 48 inches long. Now, when I built my first table, I ran into a bit of a problem when it came to attaching the outermost seat support, or seat slat. I couldn't use my Craig jig because of the angle and the pocket holes would have shown through with the angle. So, I still didn't want to have to drill through the top. So what I ended up doing was taking a 3/8 inch bit and drilling a counter bore in here for the first board for the head of the screw, and used regular decking screws to go through and attach it. Then on the second one, I went back and used my Craig jig to attach the second board that is closest to the table. When I attached the seat slat on my first table, I found it difficult to hold up the seat slat while you tried to screw it in by yourself. So I set it down off my floor, and I'm going to use one of these reversible spreaders to hold it up against the seat supports while I screw it in place. I like to hang them over the edge of the seat supports by about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit more. You want to make sure that they overhang to the sides by 4 inches. Okay. Making sure that nothing moved, you can go ahead and secure it down. I'm not using glue. With the table flipped back upright, you can go ahead and attach your second seat slat. Using your 1/2 inch spacer again, go ahead and lay down your second seat slat and make sure that you have that 1/2 inch gap between your 2 boards. If you're using Craig screws, make sure you draw a line and drill your screws now. If you're not, you can go ahead and line up the ends and screw them through the top. I have my table flipped over on its side for easier access to the pocket hole screws underneath. And there you go, a nicely sized picnic table for kids of all ages. That is, assuming that your 9-year-old isn't 6'3". If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to give me a like or a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos from me, you can press that subscribe button and you'll see the new one that I post every Saturday. Down in the description you'll find links to my Facebook, Twitter, and Etsy page. If you want to find more information about this table and the plans that I used to build it in this video, there's also a link to the plans. Thanks for watching and have a good day.